Even if I view my Steam Deck as a portable indie machine, the truth is that every now and then I want to give AAA games a try. It's not only because they offer a different experience than indies do, but also for the sheer novelty of being able to play what usually tends to be a console game on the go. I'm sure some might say that the Switch has been able to offer that experience for close to a decade, but it's not the same. My deck being able to play more than indies is one of the main reasons why I decided to play NeonWhite. Since I wasn't sure what to expect of the experience, at least when it comes to performance, I was pleasantly surprised to notice that the gameplay was pretty smooth. I know that to pixel peepers out there, shout out to ACG, it's not as smooth as it could be, so it's not smooth at all, but I was fine with how it played. This is also coming from someone that played Max Payne 1 on a PC that was so underpowered that I may as well have been viewing a slideshow instead of playing a game. Back then I took things as they were because that's what was available to me, and that was better than nothing. Nowadays I can comfortably play a lot of games at 1440p and 100 plus frames per second, but if a game's performance isn't to that level, it's not like I'll consider it unplayable slop. NeonWhite is a pretty strict game, but at the same time, it's interesting how much free play is possible. It's not only in how you eventually learn to shave off time from a level's runtime, but also if you ignore the timer/destination point. Early on, I started to use this not only for my own enjoyment and to take in more of what the levels had to offer, but also to be able to play more effectively. The name of the game is pretty much speedrunning, so knowing when and how to approach certain situations was important. I couldn't always figure out the best route to take or moves to utilize, so that added a lot to NW's replay value. I'm sure some will consider that to be a lesser form of replay value, but I was fine with that. Replay value and NW is something I'll keep discussing at a later point. Initially, NW offered levels that were quick and to the point. It's easy to see why, since that was the game's way of getting your toes wet. I don't recall how soon into NW things changed, but I eventually saw how large levels were a great change of pace. Not only did this test my understanding of the level's necessary/present abilities and mechanics, they tested my endurance. It's because I had to stay on my toes for extended periods of time. I realized that a minute really isn't that long, but it is when you're being asked to perform intricate tasks within that period of time. NW is a game that asks a lot out of you, but what's great is that it does its fair share of the heavy lifting while you're doing the same. I liked how creative I could be with the powers I started to collect as I progressed through the game. As if being creative with one ability wasn't enough, it eventually got to the point where I could combine them to do something new, like using bombs to jump higher. At first it was somewhat basic, but NW started to demand more of me. Noticing that new abilities were introduced pretty regularly was cool, but so was noticing new mechanics that were unrelated to your powers. I liked how new mechanics were added without them needing to be different abilities that you could control. For example, Violet's traps that forced me to maneuver differently. Rather than continuing to approach levels straightforward as I'd grown accustomed to, now I had one more thing to worry about. I'm sure that some will interpret that to be a bad thing, but it wasn't. It's because NW knew how to go about introducing new mechanics and abilities in such a way that they weren't overwhelming. While that's true, at times I felt that it was easy to get confused with the mechanics/abilities due to the number of buttons that needed to be pressed quickly. Chances are that some of you have experienced similar situations, but it feels like a tongue twister for your hands, especially when trying to do things fast. This regularly happened when I needed to perform abilities one after another. Jumping from A to B is one thing, but needing to double jump, switch to another ability, time the jump so that I'm at the right spot, and then use a different ability to launch myself to the next area was more than I expected. I eventually got the hang of it, seeing as how I was able to rank pretty well throughout NW and also beat it. I realize that I'm probably contradicting myself, but the difference is how I'm being asked to respond to an obstacle. With Violet's traps, I was being asked to avoid them. Sometimes I needed to use an ability to do so, but for the most part, I was able to get around them without having to second guess myself. It's when I was forced to use abilities one after another in an intricate manner that I started to realize I wasn't accustomed to NW's mechanics as well as I thought I was. NW is a game that's ideal for speedrunning, and as a result of that, there's a lot when it comes to how much replay value it has to offer. I didn't feel pushed to replay levels, but I still felt inclined to do so. It's because of how easy it was to replay them, and as a result of that, learn how to play faster. I felt encouraged to keep trying over and over again because each run taught me something new, whether it was how to use an ability to shave off time at a specific section of a level, or even what could be totally skipped. Like I previously mentioned, I initially took advantage of being able to freely explore NW's levels for the fun of it. I enjoyed being able to take in what its levels had to offer, but the further I advanced through NW, the more I realized that exploration led to finding shortcuts for faster run times. If I wasn't satisfied with my runtime, chances are that there was something that I'd overlooked or hadn't gotten the hang of. Unlockables that became available during subsequent runs were helpful when it came towards improving my runtime. While that's true, I felt that some of them felt out of order. I can see how some were meant to be viewed as optional/side content, but there were others that genuinely changed how you approached a level. I thought it was weird that the ghost playbacks became available at a point when they weren't entirely necessary. What I mean is that you would think that something like that would be one of the first unlockables, not one of the last ones. By the time I unlocked them, I'd grown accustomed to the level I was on, and was pretty satisfied with my runtime. Unlocking this sooner rather than later would have helped a lot. It's because my understanding of the overall level and what it was asking of me would have been greater. I'm sure that some will say that it's better to learn things on your own rather than getting a helping hand, but then what's the point of offering a helping hand when it's likely that a player no longer needs it once it's available to them? I quickly got the feeling that the levels collectibles would affect the game's ending. It's mainly because there was one for each of the other Neons I was friendly with, but also because giving them presents increased my relationship level with them. At times it was easy going out of my way to get these gifts because I could spot and get to them fairly quickly. Sometimes that wasn't the case, so I'd just ignore them. As a result of collecting enough of these gifts, I was able to unlock side missions and dialogue that helped flesh out NW's story and the relationships I had with the other Neons. I liked that these side missions added something else besides what the main levels did. At one point I felt that I preferred them because I didn't feel like they were as burdensome as the main levels could sometimes be. Either way, they added more spice to a game that I quickly grew to appreciate, and even if I didn't play through each one, I got a lot out of the ones I unlocked and beat. From the initial impressions I had of NW, I was expecting it to just stick to what it had shown me. It was a while before I realized that boss fights were a thing and how awesome they were. It was a bit bittersweet for me because the boss fight with Green was awesome, but I was left wishing that the game had more boss fights. I liked that they offered a good mix of core gameplay with new mechanics during the actual boss fight. I realized that it probably seems weird for me to be praising a game putting even more onto my plate for me to balance, but it did so in a well-organized way. With a lesser game, this could have easily come off as sloppy, but NW didn't, and that's praiseworthy. While NW's story wasn't bad, I also don't consider it something to write home about. Some of the dialogue was funny, but I mainly interacted with the NPCs for side missions and to improve relationship levels. It didn't help that some of the dialogue/interactions felt more like filler. These moments were short and didn't add much to the story. I'm sure that the point of them is to be amusing, but sometimes they just didn't tickle my funny bone. NW managed to do something only a few games a year are able to do, and that's quickly hooked me in. I regularly try to find games that'll really leave me hooked, but I don't find those as often as I would like. Chances are that I need to be exposed to more games, or straight up just play the games I have in my backlog. While that may be true, I appreciate NeonWhite for being able to grab my attention in the way that it did. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it offers perfect gameplay, but it manages to over-deliver a great experience with so many ideas. That probably doesn't seem like a big deal to some of you, but it is to me because every game doesn't manage to do this. People sometimes think that adding more content, mechanics, or any other aspect of a game to the overall experience makes it better, but that's not true. Sometimes less is more, other times more is more. What's key is taking the ideas that you have and delivering them in such a way that they don't seem sloppily thrown together, but that's easier said than done. NeonWhite wasn't a perfect game, but it left me wanting to have more experiences like I had with it, and I feel that I got my money's worth. It seems like the kind of game that can be enjoyed by a wide audience, but I can see some not enjoying the speedrunning aspects of NeonWhite. Either way, if you like what you've seen, feel free to give NeonWhite a try. How do you feel about mechanically intricate games? What games have quickly hooked you in? What kind of replay value most appeals to you? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much for watching.